Husband barely speaking to me after I questioned his secretary's claim that my childhood best friend or first boyfriend sexually abused her 12 years ago. Please read everything and don't comment based on the title. There are quite a few details that need to be known in this situation. I'd like to start off by saying I'm a social worker and I currently work with teens. I'm compassionate, understanding, and patient. And I've gone through years of training to dedicate myself to helping others. I'm not someone who is judgmental or otherwise inconsiderate of others. My husband owns a local interior design company and has had the same secretary since he opened 3 years ago. We'll call her Katie. I've gotten to know Katie over the years, both from visiting hubby at work, but also from all the times that she would text my husband late at night when she was feeling anxious. I trust my husband wholeheartedly, and he has never been secretive with me about anything, including her. When it started happening, he was really weirded out and told me about it right away. She would text him first about feeling anxious about her job performance, but over time it began escalating to her sharing all of her anxieties and insecurities with him. After a few too many late night, "I just need someone to talk to" episodes, he told her that it was becoming unprofessional and that he wanted to help her out, but texting him at 1 a.m. was not okay. I'm not going to go into details of their conversations, but I just picked up on a lot of attention-seeking vibes. I work with troubled teens, most of whom are girls, and I know how they operate. Katie is 26, we are 28. I know we aren't too far apart in age, but a lot of her antics reminded me of the things my kids at work do. Lots of instances where she would say something self-deprecating, essentially to bait my husband into telling her that it wasn't true and that she was amazing. I just don't think anybody in their mid-20s should still be playing those games, and if they are, then they should be seeking help for a potential diagnosis and treatment. Anyway, my husband came home yesterday pretty upset. He sits me down and says he has to ask me something that might be upsetting. He asked me if my childhood best friend or first boyfriend ever, let's call him Tim, sexually assaulted me. I had no idea why he would ask me that. I met Tim when I was 12. We became best friends and lost our virginities to each other when we were 15. It was consensual. He kept asking me if I was okay, and he was practically shaking with nerves the whole time. I was the one who wanted to have sex, and we had many conversations before we actually did. He was not capable of sexual assault. My husband proceeded to tell me that Katie came into work that day really off. He asked what was wrong, and she very casually said that she saw the man who assaulted her at a restaurant the night before and is still upset from seeing him. Up until then, he had no idea that she had been sexually assaulted, and according to him, she dropped it so casually as if it was a common thing. She told him about how it happened when she was 14 and he was 2 years older. She described the scene at a party that, honest to God, sounded identical to a specific scene from the TV show Degrassi. She said that they were in court proceedings for years where he was found not guilty. Also, the outcome of this assault on Degrassi. My husband asked who it was, and she said his name was Tim Jones. My husband knows about my relationship with Tim because he was around when Tim and I had our falling out. He looked him up on Facebook and showed a picture to Katie to confirm it was the same guy. It was. More needed background. Tim and I dated from ages 15 to 18 after being friends for 3 years. He was my absolute best friend. Tim moved to a different town when we were starting grade 11, so at 16 years old. We stayed together and saw each other pretty much every weekend. He has a January birthday, so he was able to drive by the time he moved, which made it easier for us. We ended up having a falling out when we were 19 because we were no longer dating but had remained close friends, but his new girlfriend was threatened by our friendship. He told me we needed to take a few steps back, so I hurtfully deleted him from Facebook, deleted his number, and haven't spoken to him in nearly 10 years. I would also like to add that Katie would have had no clue that he and I were involved because he and I don't have each other on social media. Photos have been deleted, he has a fresh Facebook account, and the one he had in high school is gone. Unless she remembered that he and I were together back then, which I doubt, I don't think she knew otherwise, but now my husband has told her. It just so happens that Katie is also from the town Tim moved to. We live in the next town over now. So I don't doubt that they could have crossed paths or been in the same social circles. She is in the same age as Tim's sister. Maybe they were friends? I'm not sure. The ages also line up, as Katie said she was 14 and he was 2 years older. But I am having the hardest time believing her story because I know the kind of person Tim was back then and I know the kind of person she is now. I feel sick that I am doubting a woman's story, but it just doesn't add up to me. Tim and I were dating at the time, and we literally saw each other every weekend. Our parents were friendly, so they trusted us to have rule-enforced sleepovers and stuff. I knew all of Tim's friends from his new school. I went to their parties, and at the end of the day, I knew what he was like sexually. He was not aggressive, he was patient and timid at that age. Katie said they were in a court proceedings for years. Tim never went to court as long as I knew him. We told each other everything. I always knew where he was. It was the age when teens were just starting to get cell phones, and we texted constantly. So when my husband told me all of this, he approached it with an "I'm so sorry you never knew" attitude. This pissed me off and I immediately questioned the story and suggested Katie was lying. This upset my husband and he started throwing all kinds of "you're not the person I thought you were" spats at me, coming right down to the point that I have no right to be a social worker if I'm not going to believe women when they come forward saying they were assaulted. I proposed that maybe Katie had a big crush on him in high school and he rejected her since he was dating me, and seeing him triggered her in such a monumental way that she had to make it out to be a bigger deal to justify her emotions. Saying, "I saw the guy who rejected me in high school 12 years ago" shouldn't be something that sets a person off, so she makes the situation out to match her emotion. Quite honestly, it's pretty textbook. My husband and I are barely speaking today because I am hurt at the things he said. He is disappointed that I'm taking my ex's side. I don't know what to believe, and I am not about to reach out to Tim after 10 years to ask about this. I'm bothered by Katie's story. I'm bothered to think that Tim might have kept this whole thing from me, and I'm bothered that my husband is immediately running to Katie's rescue and not considering my position of knowledge. This has turned into a huge fight between me and my husband when it doesn't even have anything to do with us. I'm so frustrated. Oh, OP, this is such a complicated story, but I have to say that your take on it doesn't sound so far-fetched. Now, of course, just like you, I don't want to say that Katie is outright lying. But also, I can't just say it's true for sure because, well, we've seen so many stories where people have just lied about this that it just hurts the real victims. So giving an opinion on this is not that easy. For example, it could have been that Tim was a really nice guy to you, but he wasn't so nice to Katie. At the same time, it could have been that Katie never even talked to Tim and she just was triggered by something else and she just pointed at the first picture she saw that your husband showed her because she wants his sympathy. Now, the problem of the story is really about you and your husband, what your husband said to you and the fact that you're upset with him because he didn't take your position of knowledge as you said. And I think that's key. You said yourself that you didn't know that Tim was ever in any court case. Well, couldn't you look that up? I mean, if it was settled and he was found not guilty, then that would be public record, right? I had to look up Degrassi and it's a Canadian show, so I'm assuming that you're from Canada. I don't know if by that age there would be a record that would be open with his name on it, but maybe you could check it out. And what I'm trying to do here is not to out Katie as a liar or as a victim. What I'm trying to do is that so you and your husband can agree on what's going on and move forward together. Now, another thing you could do maybe is reach out to Tim, even though you haven't spoken to him in 10 years, and say, "Hey Tim, guess what? My husband is working with Katie and she mentioned she knows you." And then see how he reacts and what kind of story he tells you. That'll give you a little bit more information as well. And again, it is such a complicated situation. I can't claim that what I'm saying is the right thing to do. It's just what's coming up to my mind right now. What do you guys think about this? How would you go about this situation? Let me know in the comment section, and now let's move on to the community comments to see what they said. Miles B. Dyson says, question, she was 14, he was 16. You lost your virginities together at 15, broke up at some point and kept in contact till 19. If there was some huge trial, wouldn't you have known about it? Trial typically has an arrest. Wouldn't you have known your childhood best friend was arrested and put into some lengthy trial? Also, pretty sure there is an arrest record to pull up online for like $20. Stop at a 7-Eleven and buy a Visa gift card. Can't trust online. Plus, keeps husband out of the loop for now. And find out. This needs to get resolved. 8-Bit Brain says, the coincidence of her attacker being the ex-boyfriend of the wife of her boss, the same boss to whom she seems to have an unprofessional attachment, this pushes the limits of believability. Lowell Wally says, sorry to sound callous, but what does it matter if her story is true or not? You have no contact with the guy and are no longer his friend. Her actions, though, are really inappropriate and unprofessional, sexual assault survivor or not. As her boss, it really feels to me that your husband should be drawing firmer boundaries. I wonder if he is too invested being her friend and confident instead of her boss. Your husband's co-worker should not be having this much of an effect on your marriage. And OP responds because she didn't delete the comments, just the post, and says, totally fair, and I agree, she should not be having this much of an effect. To me, it matters not only because Tim and I were incredibly close and it's an unsettling thing to hear, but also because I don't think it is true and therefore my husband is still being pulled into unnecessary drama by her, and it simply gets under my skin to see him feeding into it. Especially because he is an honest guy and doesn't expect others to be dishonest about stuff like this. He is working on setting boundaries with others, but it is a reflex for him to nurture and care for people. He is the type of person who tries to keep everyone happy and, as a first-time business owner, just wants everything running smoothly. As an employee, she is great and efficient, and he can rely on her when he is not in the office, so he is reluctant to hire someone new and is also worried about wrongful termination legalities. Iron Will Defup says, look up the court case. If it's true, you'll find it. I'd be pretty pissed at him for this over-involvement with his secretary though. He might be loyal as hell, but she's obviously super needy. And OP responds, yeah, even though I trust him, I have definitely been put off by the way she has latched onto my husband, and it's caused fights in the past. I've tried looking up the court case and nothing comes up. That being said, they were both minors, so I'm not sure if that means the case wouldn't be public? Okay, well it sounds to me like the community gave OP some pretty decent perspectives regarding her problem, and they did bring up a point that I didn't address in my commentary, which is the relationship between Katie and OP's husband. And I do agree with them all. It is not a professional relationship at all, it's too friendly, but maybe that's the kind of business he wants to run. Anyways, it's time to move on to the update to see what happened next and how the story ends, but of course before that, here's another one of my playlists for you to enjoy after this video. Now let's move on with that update. Hi everyone, thank you for your input on the situation that I posted last night. I appreciate those of you who understood my emotional position, and I also appreciate people who asked me to consider that perhaps Tim wasn't who I thought he was. I'd like to address that not believing her story had more to do with the fact that Tim and I were inseparable at the time that this took place, and I just had a hard time coming to terms with the idea that he was in court proceedings during our whole relationship. The parts where I said he wasn't capable of sexual assault were my own denials, which I addressed in my final paragraph, where I was emotionally shaken at the thought that he could have done something like that, and I never knew. I didn't believe her because I disliked her, and I also never even said that I didn't like her. She has always been pleasant with me, and I've never felt threatened by her, annoyed that she took advantage of my husband's heart and would reach out to him in the middle of the night? Sure, but I never said that I disliked her as a person. Now for the update. My husband just called me while he was out getting a coffee to apologize for the things he said to me and how he jumped on me for being suspicious of her story. Katie came into work today and told my husband that she has been ridden with anxiety ever since telling him what happened because she did lie, having no idea that I was his girlfriend at the exact time that she described. And really, this is just proving how small this world is because Tim and I lived about 45 minutes away from each other, and my husband and I only recently moved to that area to be closer to his work, so she had no reasons to think that I had ties there as a teenager. Katie explained the real story to my husband. She was pressured into having sex by a guy who was 2 years older than her in high school. She said it didn't happen at a party like she described, but just while they were hanging out together. She said she wanted to take him to court, but knew there wouldn't be any evidence, so she didn't pursue it. The reason she lied was because she matched with the same guy on Tinder and actually went on a date with him the night she said she saw Tim. What? She said the date was fine, but she wasn't sure if she wanted to proceed because of their past and the emotions it brought up. She didn't want to tell my husband the truth about who this guy was, just in case they continued to date, because she didn't want my husband to think she was crazy for going back to him. She wanted my husband to know what was causing her emotions at work the other day, though, so that is when she made up that story. She said Tim was the first person who came to mind as someone who was 2 years older than her at their school. She wasn't expecting that my husband would know who he was because Tim doesn't live in the area anymore. Katie told my husband that she realizes how crazy she must seem for going on a date with him and that she won't be seeing him again. So there we go. My husband and I are just moving past this. Altogether, her coming clean has made my husband upset that he was lied to and is worried about her performance as an employee going forward. And for those wondering, she didn't know that I was suspicious of her story, and my husband offered all kinds of support because he did believe her. They didn't speak about it yesterday, and she came in today saying that she needed to come clean because my personal connection could have had my husband catching her in a lie, and she wanted to avoid that. So there you have it. Thanks for all of your input. Oh man, Katie needs help. A lot of it. So she was pressured into having sex by a guy, and 12 years later, she matches with him on Tinder. That means she swiped right on a guy she knew who put her in this position, and then she went out on a date with him. And she was so upset by this that she lied to your husband, OP. This is beyond wild. And also, she's involving your husband in her private personal life too much. I would definitely put some very firmer boundaries here. If not, search for another employee. Of course, it sucks that Katie's going through this because it must not be nice, but she's not dealing with it in the best way. She needs some professional help, not your husband. In any case, OP, I think it's a positive that you and your husband at least are back on the same page and putting it behind you guys. So here's wishing you all the best in the future, OP. Thank you for sharing. Now let's finish this video with a mood booster post. This post is from the subreddit Malicious Compliance, and it's by user The Bliss Fox. Just trying to obey the dress code, sir. Make your choice. When I was in high school, I was part of a punk band that played regular gigs at a few venues around the city. We would regularly open for touring bands that came into town. I guess we were a bit of a novelty act since we were all like 15 years old and put on a good show. Well, part of being an interesting punk band is having a wild appearance, and as such, I always had some kind of brightly colored mohawk or spikes on my head. So one day, in the middle of the school year, the school sends home an updated dress code notice that now includes no unnatural hair color or styles, and a few other annoying changes that were specifically directed at me and my friends. At the time, my hair was actually bleach blonde, so technically I didn't have to do anything. But when I got home, I remembered that I had a ridiculously plush curly gray granny wig that I had bought as a gag. That's when my devious little mind had a great idea. The next day at school, I showed up in combat boots with a plaid suit and my hilarious granny wig. During the first period, I had a really nice teacher who complimented my humor. Second period, I had a real hard-ass teacher who I knew must have had something to do with the dress code change because he had actually argued about my appearance before. So, I showed up early to class and had a seat. Class is about to start. The teacher walks in, gets everyone quiet and at attention. Then I notice him notice me. He calls me out. "Yes, sir?" I ask. "Take that ridiculous thing off your head right now!" I comply, and as I take it off, my freshly dyed bright blue mohawk springs up. The look on his face was priceless. The whole class was stifling their laughter. We all knew he was gonna have to choose. He just tightens his mouth, shakes his head and says, "Ugh, whatever." I got to do this with every hard teacher for the rest of my day, forcing them to make the choice between the devil and the deep blue sea. Inevitably, it seems I was able to make the rule unforceable, and after a few weeks, other kids were showing up with unnatural hair as well. No one gave us much resistance after that. "Well, Opie, he wanted you to take the wig off and you absolutely